Heidi-ho there, ChessKid neighbors. Before we get to the action today, I'd like you to hit that subscribe button because we're going to do an opening today, an opening tomorrow, maybe an opening the day after that. Who knows? But today's opening, what to do against e4. Well, a lot of kids like to play the Scandinavian. Sometimes we call it the Scando. And you know, the former world champion Magnus Carlsen, he's from Scandinavia. In fact, me and him once had a little argument over whether or not Iceland is in Scandinavia, but it is not a geography lesson today. It's a chess lesson. Why would Black play the Scandinavian? Well, today I'm going to show you Black's dream in the Scandinavian. Maybe in a future video, I'll talk to you about how White can diffuse the dream. Okay, if White takes, which is the most common response, Black sometimes plays knight f6 to go after the pawn with the knight, but more often than not, Black simply takes back. And the most common move for White is to attack the queen. After all, when you bring the queen out early, you tend to lose some tempos. Now, it turns out there's a lot of places for the queen. Most often she goes here, but a lot of times she just goes right back home. And in recent times, some grandmasters even choose the d6 square. But let's just take a look at queen a5. It is the most popular move in my database. And White often plays the move d4. And Black can play a move like knight f6, and White can develop with a move like knight f3. And it turns out a lot of the Scandinavian is actually a pawn structure-based opening. In this position, Black has a very clear target, the d4 pawn, because it's on a half-open file, and for the moment it cannot be guarded by a pawn, because this pawn on c2 obviously cannot go to c3. Black, however, does not have a clear target. So even though Black has messed around with the queen and wasted a few tempos, and even though Black's a little bit behind in development, Black has this lasting idea of going after this pawn. In fact, Black often continues with the move bishop to g4. That way, if Black plays a move like e6 and c6 to stop the pawn from moving, the bishop is not in jail, he's out of jail. And of course, if you ever take the knight, you remove one of the defenders of that weak pawn. And this is basically Black's plan. Black's going to take this knight at his leisure, and Black is also going to play e6, c6. Eventually, this rook is going to land on the d file, and Black hopes to win this pawn, and then eventually win a very long endgame in like 60 or 70 moves. So there you go. You thought the Scandinavian was super aggressive. Turns out, a lot of times, what you're trying to do is just win a pawn and take it to the endgame. Let's take a look at the Scandinavian in action. This is a game that FunMasterMike played recently on ChessKid. In fact, it was on my live show. Now, if I'm being 100% honest, it did not come from the Scandinavian move order, but be honest, kids, if I hadn't told you that, you wouldn't have known, because it's the exact same pawn structure, except in this case, the queen is back here on d8. But I do want to report, the queen did come out to d5, and she did come back to d8. You had no way of knowing that, but I'm telling you that happened. And what did I do on the next move? Well, I recognized, even though I'm not a Scando player, although maybe I should be, I know the themes, so luckily I was familiar with the idea, and I played bishop g4, and you already know why, because I just got done telling you. When you pin the knight, you remove one of the defenders of the weak pawn, and also, I want to play e6 and c6 one day, but I don't want my bishop stuck back here on c8, just watching the action from afar. So, White played bishop e3 to protect the pawn, and now my plan is, pretty much ready-made. It's like microwave popcorn. Just put it in the oven and, wait a little bit. So I played c6. My opponent played rook e1. I got my king out of the middle. Did not like this rook lining up with my king, of course. White played the move queen e2. I played e6. Now this pawn is firmly planted. I should mention, it should not be your goal to try to win the pawn right away. For example, if I take the knight here, and the queen takes, and then I go pawn grabbing, uh-oh, now one of the rooks is coming to the square d1, and although I can defend my bishop, I'm actually the one back on my heels playing defense. So I really want to win the pawn under my own circumstances. So after queen e2, I just played e6. After all, it's easier to attack a pawn that can't move, and this pawn, well, it really can't go to d5 anytime. Now White played the move rook to a1. I just played knight to d7, just finished my development. My opponent finally played h3. Notice how I kept the pin until the very last moment. I made my opponent at least waste a move. Then I took, removing one of the defenders of this pawn. My opponent took. I played the move knight to f6. My knight might be hopping into this square one day. Bishop to g5, and I just got out of the pin. My opponent was nice and took. I took. Opponent took. I took. And now we're finally getting to that long endgame plan. I just want to win this pawn and then use my extra pawn to win the game. And well, that's exactly what happened. It's not rocket science. The king moved to h2, and I got all of my rooks to the e file. This is not complicated chess. All of my pieces are working very well together. Now, my opponent probably would have been better off trying to maybe play knight e2 a little bit earlier on and not activating the king. But nonetheless, knight e2 came. Can you find a way to attack this pawn even more times? Well, my most popular expression on ChessKid is putting PP on the PP. We're about to do just that. We're going to put pressure on the pinned piece. And I played c5. My opponent defended, and then I played e5. I have all my p's on the p. If we count, we have 1, 2. The bishop counts as a third attacker. The rook is 4, and this rook is an X-ray attacker. 5 attackers. You probably cannot find another chess position with all of our pieces in such harmony. 5 attackers, and there's only 1, 2, 3, 4 defenders. It's officially my pawn. If you push, I can just take you. And if you take either of my pawns, doesn't matter which one, I'm going to take your rook and win material. And after my opponent's king moved, I took, my opponent took, I took, I'm up a pawn. My pawn continued to travel down the board, and I ended up winning the game. It actually took me, let's see if I can do some math here, 47 more moves. So this is every Scandinavian player's dream in action. Maybe it's an opening you want to add, but in our next video, we may actually show you how to deal with the Scandinavian.